미안하다. 깜빡했다, 셀카.
What if one silent glance had been hiding a truth that could change everything between them? What if the tears Taehyung tried so hard to hide were not caused by anger, but by a feeling he himself could no longer understand? And what if Jimin, after all this time, suddenly realized that the warmth he had always protected in his heart had quietly become something much deeper? Before you continue, tell me in the comments, have you ever realized your feelings only when it was almost too late? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay until the final chapter, because the ending may not be what you expect. The practice room was unusually quiet that evening. The city lights outside the large windows shimmered against the darkening sky, while the faint sound of rain tapped softly against the glass. Taehyung sat alone on the floor, his back resting against the mirrored wall, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of a water bottle. He had stayed behind long after everyone else finished rehearsing, pretending he needed more practice, pretending he wanted to perfect a small mistake in the choreography. The truth was far more complicated. For weeks, something inside him had felt strangely fragile whenever he watched Jimin laugh with the others. It wasn't jealousy, or at least that was what Taehyung kept telling himself. Jimin had always been affectionate, always quick to hug, tease, and care for the people he loved. Yet lately, every smile Jimin gave seemed to linger in Taehyung's mind long after the moment had passed. The door opened quietly. Taehyung looked up, expecting one of the staff members, but it was Jimin. "You're still here?" Jimin asked softly, stepping inside and shaking the raindrops from his jacket. Taehyung forced a small smile. "Could ask you the same thing." Jimin walked closer and sat beside him without hesitation. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence between them was familiar, comfortable even, but tonight it carried an unusual weight. "You've been avoiding us," Jimin said carefully. Taehyung laughed under his breath. "That's dramatic." "I'm serious." Taehyung turned his gaze toward the rain outside. "I've just been tired." Jimin studied his face for a long moment. He knew Taehyung too well to believe such a simple answer. They had spent years together, through exhausting tours, sleepless nights, and moments when words were unnecessary because they could read each other's expressions almost instinctively. "That's not the real reason," Jimin whispered. Taehyung's chest tightened. He wanted to deny it again, wanted to keep everything buried where it had been safe. But Jimin's voice held too much concern, too much sincerity. "What if I don't know the real reason either?" Taehyung asked quietly. Jimin frowned slightly, surprised by the honesty in his tone. The rain grew heavier, filling the room with a soft rhythmic sound that seemed to isolate them from the rest of the world. Jimin leaned back against the mirror beside him. "Then let me stay until you figure it out." Those words should have comforted Taehyung. Instead, they made the ache in his chest even stronger. Because that was the problem. Jimin always stayed. He stayed when Taehyung was anxious before a performance. He stayed when Taehyung doubted himself. He stayed through every argument, every misunderstanding, every moment when the world outside became too overwhelming. And somewhere along the way, Taehyung had begun to fear what would happen if one day Jimin stopped staying. The thought frightened him more than he wanted to admit. Jimin glanced at him again. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Taehyung swallowed hard. Could he? Could he really tell Jimin that lately his heart reacted differently whenever Jimin touched his shoulder, laughed at his jokes, or looked at him with those warm eyes that seemed capable of seeing through every wall he built around himself? He closed his eyes briefly. "Do you ever get scared?" Taehyung murmured. "That if you say something out loud, everything will change?" Jimin's expression softened immediately. "All the time." Taehyung let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. "That's not very reassuring." Jimin smiled gently. "Maybe not. But sometimes things need to change." The words hung in the air between them. Taehyung looked away quickly, afraid that if he met Jimin's eyes for too long, the truth would become impossible to hide. A sudden vibration interrupted the moment. Jimin checked his phone and sighed. "The manager is asking where we are." "You should go," Taehyung said immediately, relieved by the interruption. Jimin hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be fine." Jimin stood slowly, but before leaving he placed a hand briefly on Taehyung's shoulder. The touch lasted only a second, yet it sent a painful warmth through Taehyung's chest. "Don't stay too long," Jimin said softly. When the door closed behind him, the room felt colder than before. Taehyung stared at the floor for a long time, his emotions twisting together in a way he could no longer untangle. He had spent years understanding himself through music, through art, through the people around him. Yet this feeling remained confusing and dangerous because it involved the one person he could not bear to lose. The next few days became increasingly difficult. Jimin noticed the distance growing between them. Taehyung still smiled during interviews, joked during rehearsals, and acted as naturally as possible whenever the group was together. But there were small changes that only someone as attentive as Jimin would notice. Taehyung avoided sitting too close to him during breaks. He answered questions with shorter responses. Sometimes Jimin would catch him staring from across the room, only for Taehyung to look away immediately when their eyes met. At first Jimin thought Taehyung might be stressed about work. Then he wondered if they had argued recently without realizing it. But the more he thought about it, the more unsettled he became. One evening, after a particularly long rehearsal, Jimin found Jungkook gathering his things near the exit. "Does Taehyung seem different to you?" Jimin asked casually. Jungkook looked up. "Different how?" "I don't know. Quieter." Jungkook considered it for a moment. "Maybe he's just thinking about something." "That's what worries me." Jungkook smiled knowingly. "You worry about him more than anyone." Jimin rolled his eyes, but he couldn't deny it. Later that night, unable to stop thinking about it, Jimin walked to the dorm's balcony for some fresh air. The city stretched endlessly below, glowing beneath the humid summer night. He was surprised to find Taehyung already there. Taehyung stood near the railing, wearing an oversized hoodie, his dark hair moving slightly in the breeze. "Can't sleep either?" Jimin asked. Taehyung glanced back briefly. "Something like that." Jimin stepped beside him. For a while they simply watched the city in silence. "You've been strange lately," Jimin said finally. Taehyung smiled faintly. "You're really not giving up on that, huh?" "No." The honesty in Jimin's answer made Taehyung's chest tighten again. Jimin turned toward him. "Did I do something wrong?" Taehyung looked genuinely startled. "What?" "No." "Then why does it feel like you're pushing me away?" Taehyung opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because the real answer was impossible. Because every time Jimin came closer, Taehyung became more aware of feelings he wasn't ready to confront. "Sometimes I think you care too much," Taehyung said quietly. Jimin blinked. "Is that supposed to be a bad thing?" "It can be." Jimin frowned, hurt flickering briefly across his face. "Caring about you has never felt like a mistake." The words struck Taehyung harder than Jimin could have known. For a dangerous moment, he almost told him everything. Almost. Instead, he looked down at the city lights and whispered, "That's exactly what scares me." Jimin stared at him, confusion and concern mixing in his expression. Before he could respond, Taehyung stepped back from the railing. "I'm tired," he said quickly. "We should get some sleep." And then he walked inside, leaving Jimin alone on the balcony with a heart that suddenly felt much heavier than before. That night, Jimin couldn't stop replaying the conversation in his mind. "That's exactly what scares me." What had Taehyung meant? The question followed him through the next day and the day after that. He began noticing things he had overlooked before. The way Taehyung's smile sometimes faded when he thought no one was watching. The way his eyes lingered during quiet moments. The way his voice softened whenever they were alone together. A realization began forming at the edge of Jimin's thoughts. but he pushed it away each time it appeared. It couldn't be that. Could it? Several days later, the group had a rare evening off. Most of the members decided to order food and watch movies together in the living room. Taehyung joined them at first, laughing at Jungkook's exaggerated commentary and teasing Hobi about his dramatic reactions to the film. For a while, everything felt almost normal again. Then Jimin absent-mindedly leaned against Taehyung's shoulder during a particularly funny scene. The reaction was immediate. Taehyung went completely still. Jimin felt the sudden tension in his body and looked up in surprise. Their faces were only inches apart. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Something unspoken passed between them. Taehyung stood abruptly. "I need some water." He left the room before anyone could respond. The others barely noticed, but Jimin did. And suddenly that frightening possibility returned stronger than ever. Jimin waited a few minutes before quietly following him to the kitchen. Taehyung stood at the counter, gripping a glass of water so tightly that his knuckles had turned pale. "Taehyung." Taehyung closed his eyes briefly before turning around. "You should be watching the movie. Not until you tell me what's going on." Taehyung laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You're incredibly stubborn. And you're avoiding the question again." The kitchen felt too small, too quiet. Jimin stepped closer. "Look at me." Slowly, reluctantly, Taehyung lifted his eyes to meet his. The vulnerability Jimin saw there made his heart ache. "Whatever it is," Jimin said gently, "you don't have to carry it alone." That was the problem. Jimin's kindness was making it impossible to keep pretending. Taehyung looked away again, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if telling you would make things complicated?" Jimin's pulse quickened. "Complicated for who?" "For both of us." The air seemed to disappear from the room. Jimin stared at him, his mind racing as pieces of the puzzle finally began falling into place. Taehyung's distance. His nervousness. The fear in his eyes whenever they grew too close. Jimin's heart began beating so loudly he was sure Taehyung could hear it. "Taehyung," he whispered. He tried to move past him, but Jimin gently caught his wrist. The touch stopped both of them. "Don't run away this time," Jimin said softly. Taehyung's shoulders trembled almost imperceptibly. For several long seconds neither of them spoke. Then Taehyung finally whispered the words he had been trying so desperately to hide. "I don't know when it happened." Jimin's breath caught. "I tried to ignore it," Taehyung continued, his voice shaking slightly. "I told myself it was just because we're close, because you've always been important to me. But every time you smile at me, every time you stay beside me." He laughed weakly. "It stopped feeling simple a long time ago." Jimin felt as if the world had suddenly gone silent. Taehyung finally looked at him, and the emotion in his eyes was so raw that it made Jimin's chest ache. "I never wanted to make things difficult," Taehyung whispered. "That's why I kept my distance." Jimin couldn't speak. Because the truth was, hearing those words didn't make him want to pull away. It made him realize something terrifying about himself. All this time, he had been so focused on Taehyung's feelings that he had never questioned his own. But now, standing in that quiet kitchen with Taehyung looking at him as if his answer could break his heart, Jimin was forced to confront emotions he had buried so deeply he barely recognized them anymore. Memories flooded his mind with painful clarity. The way his day always felt brighter when Taehyung was happy. The instinctive need to protect him whenever he was struggling. The jealousy he occasionally felt when Taehyung became unusually close to someone else. The countless times he had chosen Taehyung first without even thinking about it. His chest tightened. Taehyung misread his silence immediately. "It's okay," he said quickly, trying to smile despite the obvious hurt in his eyes. "You don't have to say anything. I know this is unfair." He gently pulled his wrist free. That was the moment something inside Jimin broke. "Wait." Taehyung paused. Jimin took a shaky breath, his heart pounding harder than it ever had before a performance. I think... He stopped, overwhelmed by the sudden realization crashing through him. I think I've been lying to myself too. Taehyung stared at him in confusion. Jimin laughed softly, almost helplessly, and ran a hand through his hair. Do you know what scared me the most these past few weeks? Taehyung shook his head. The thought that you were pulling away because you didn't need me anymore. Taehyung's eyes widened slightly. Jimin stepped closer, his voice trembling with honesty. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created solely for entertainment purposes. The characters portrayed are inspired by public figures but are presented in an entirely fictional context. The events, conversations, emotions, relationships, and situations described in this story are imaginary and should not be interpreted as factual or reflective of the real lives, personalities, or relationships of any individuals mentioned.